All right, let's go over using YouIDraw, which is an in-browser app for creating vector graphics. So it's something that you would say is similar to Adobe Illustrator. Now, it's not like Photoshop. Photoshop is made for creating bitmap graphics or graphics that use pixels, and that's not what we're after whenever we're doing vector graphics. So just keep that in mind as we go through. Now I do want to compare this a little bit to Illustrator. Pardon my screen here. So I'm going to pop over to Illustrator for a second just so we can look at the two similarities. So you're going to see a lot of the same tools. There are some tools I really badly miss from Illustrator that UIDraw does not have. Among those tools are fancy things like, say, the shape builder or any of the warping kinds of tools. None of that stuff exists on that program. You also do not have the knife tool or the scissors, which were big tools for me. I like the knife and the scissors tools. And the eraser tool does not work like it works in Illustrator. If you do erase two things, or erase something that would divide a shape into two, in Illustrator it makes it two shapes. In UIDraw it doesn't. There's a gap there, but those two pieces will move together, and I haven't found a good way to separate them, so ungrouping doesn't do it. You are going to find buttons in UIDraw that are like the Pathfinder. You'll have these first three shape modes and then the divide mode, and just as a reminder of how those are, you do them the same way. You overlap your shapes and select both shapes. The first shape mode is the one that unites them. It's called something else in UIDraw. The second shape mode is the one that minuses the top one, so it takes a bite out of it. And the third one is the one that only keeps the intersected area, which we use to make leaves and things. And then this bottom one is going to demonstrate the divide, which is where, it starts here and we have three shapes, but it's going to divide it into five shapes because the overlapping areas will become their own shapes. And that same tool exists in UIDraw. You do have to ungroup it to move them apart, but basically there you go. And so we are going to have that same tool available to us. You're also going to see the properties panel, a layers panel, and a libraries panel. They're a little different than what you see in Illustrator, but at least you do have those tools. So we have that overlap. Okay, so here's an example of something created in UIDraw. It's just a typography poster. I didn't make it. It's one of the templates, and whenever you click on File and New in UIDraw, you have a lot of templates that you can start from. So kind of sometimes it's fun to start with a template just so you can kind of see the options that exist out there. So to show you some more of these pieces, again, here's your tools. Up here's your Pathfinder tools. So union, subtract, intersect, and divide are the three that I demonstrated. You have your move forward and backward. That's your layer forward and backward tools. Here's your layers, and you can pick them up and scoot them. They also have, you can double click and name them. You can lock them, and you can use the visibility toggle for the little eyeball. So that all still exists just like the other. Then you have your properties panel, and that changes depending on what you're clicked on. So if I'm clicked on a shape, I have my main fill and stroke properties. Again, you just check mark if you want a stroke or not, or change your fill or your stroke color by going over here to the side. Pretty simple stuff. You can, when you're changing colors, if you know the hexadecimal code, which is what I usually use when I'm trying to figure stuff out, you can type the hexadecimal code in if you're trying to match. Also, you have the option of solid, or you can switch it to gradients. You've got your linear gradients, your radial gradients, and then there's a bunch of patterns built in, or you can upload a pattern, and you can scale a pattern too. So if I put this grass one on here, I can scale it so it's smaller or that it's bigger chunks of that, grass, for instance. So it's all very simple to do from within here. If you're making changes to gradients, you do have to double click the color and then go choose whatever color you're going to be for that side of the gradient, and then double click on the other end of your gradient to do the same sort of thing. But again, very simple to do. You can modify those as well. So that's your fill and stroke part. Now down here at the bottom, this is what would be like the stroke panel in Illustrator. So this is where you change the size of the stroke. In this case, I've changed it to a dashed stroke, so I came in here and chose one of these. And then if you're wanting to have bigger gaps between them, then that's what this is all about here. How long your dash is and what the gap is going to be between your dashes. If you want to have dots instead of dashes, then this first box would be a 0. That's the same as in Illustrator, by the way. If you're wanting to do dots, you make that first box a 0. Down here is what creates what we call a round cap at the end of a stroke, or in this case makes them circles. If you have it on the one next to it, that makes those squares. Kind of hard to see, but I promise those are squares up in there. Let me see if I can get my hand tool here so we can show you. So there you go. So see, if I switch the cap to round caps, we get that, or we will get square caps. So that's, again, exactly like in Illustrator. Next to this are your transform, your skew, your rotate. All your alignment ones are here. Flip horizontal, all of that stuff is there. The little feather one is where you modify the opacity. So that's why this one is see-through. It's at 50% opacity. And then here's where you can add things such as drop shadows, inner shadows. Even has one that's called reflection, which is cool. It takes it and reflects it like it's on water. So those are all in there too. And then this last one is actually the entire canvas. So the entire background of this document is what this gradient is. Okay, so if we took that off, there'd be no background here at all. And since those are all white, you can't see them except for the one that I made that's not white. And then this is your canvas size, the size of your actual document. Now in the free version of YouIDraw, if you export, you can only export in PNG or JPEG format in the free version. And one of the things you really have to pay attention to is what you're exporting. So something like this where you want the entire canvas, you would say entire canvas. But if I just had something I drew, like a logo, then I would set it to all objects so that it exported the objects that were on there only. That's the only way you're going to get transparent backgrounds. So for instance, I'll show you this one here. This is when I set it to all objects, and this is entire canvas. So even though I didn't tell it to make my canvas white, it's going to come out that way if I export the entire canvas as a PNG. But if I export all objects as a PNG, this circle I drew will come through here. The free version of the program does have a watermark, and the watermark's always at the bottom. So, you know, if you're just creating something to put into a Google slideshow, you know, I guess you could take that little crop off of there as long as you gave recognition to the fact that you use the YouIDraw program. But anyway, so basically just understand that there is going to be a watermark with this free version, and if you don't pay attention when you're exporting, you're probably going to export the whole thing and then end up with a white background, which is usually not what we want to do. Okay, so that goes over most of those things, and you're going to have a lot of the same tools. So you can see, like here where this path is drawn, that of course is just changed to a dotted path, but that was drawn with the pen tool. You do still have a pen tool, it's just not as robust as what you have in Illustrator. You click, click, click. If I'm making lightning, you know, click again, click again, click again, or whatever to make your lightning bolt. When you have a shape, if you double click your mouse, that gives you automatically into what would be like the direct selection where you can go through and move your points around. So you can still do all of that stuff in here. Again, your properties panel over here is going to give you things that apply to your current selection. There are also shapes that come with it. So let me switch back to my move tool and click. Over here under library, it has a gradient library. So if you did want to put a certain preset gradient on a shape, you can choose the gradient library and it will do that. Or if you're not clicked on anything, you can come here and then there's categories of, I won't call them clip art, I mean they're drawings I guess, in here that you can add. And then the next one across is your shapes. And so there's a bunch of built-in shapes, way more than the default that comes with Illustrator, unless you go open it up, you know, all your libraries. But this is quite a bit. This is just the objects here, so you can see there's lots. So if you're creating infographics or something like that, you've got a ton of already pre-made graphics that are in here that you can bring in. And if you bring them in, they come in at the top. So whenever you put those in there, they're going to be at the top. And then they're editable. So, you know, just like I said here, when I zoom up and then take my hand tool and grab and scoot down to this corner, if I double click with my move tool on here, I will still get all those adjustment handles. And so I can still go through and modify those. I can move them. Just like with your pen tool in Illustrator, you can get rid of them. So if you press delete, you'll get rid of a point. If you click back on the path, you'll get a point that you can drag out. If you double click the point, you can switch it to a curvy point instead of it being a sharp point. And if you have two sides of these handles here, if you hold down Control and pull in, you can move one independent of the other. Now I'll tell you to be really careful with that, because if you go back and you move the other one without holding Control, it pops them both back out too that way. So you kind of have to pay attention. Once you start holding Control, you have to kind of keep doing it in order to make changes to the shape. Okay. Overlapping shapes, again, you can still utilize multiple shapes with multiple shapes to utilize those tools up here at the top for Pathfinder. So if I go in here, put this shape on top of that shape, oops, select them both. Sometimes they're hard to select. If you hold down oops, can't get hold of them. It would be Shift normally. It's Control in here if you can grab a hold of it. Sometimes I have to go in and find the paths on here. So it looks like they're both selected. It's kind of hard to tell in here if they're both selected, but they are. And then if I go to subtract, that will subtract that top one. There we go. And so now we've got that punched out of that path. So your pen tool works very similarly. Again, there is no knife tool. The eraser tool acts really weird. You can erase, this is erasing on the blue part, but depending on what you're clicked on, you can erase various things. Let me see if I can grab a hold of, okay, so this is this particular shape, if I can be on it without being on the name. There. So see, it's just very unpredictable. It doesn't usually do, like, if I wanted to punch that out, it's not going to punch that out. So the eraser doesn't work very predictably. Okay, one more thing here, text. You can add text. When you click to add text, it's going to say type here. And then, of course, you can press Control A to select everything. If you are on your text tool, and you kind of have to, like, put it down the first time, like, put your text down and then click on it. Generally speaking, mine's not popping up now, but we'll get in there. Your properties will switch over and you can have a T over here for text. So once we have that little T in our properties, I can select all of this, and then you can change your fonts, and there's quite a few fonts to choose from in here. Your font size, your different font styles. This is your alignment, left, center, right. This here is your line spacing or leading, so you can make them closer together. And they don't preview, so that's going to be the weird thing. Like when I click off of it, see, now it's closer together. I don't know why that is. It's just the way this one works. But I've learned over time about some of the weird things. So like that was the way it was originally on there. I can't really see the after until after I accept it. And then this is going to be your kerning or tracking of your letters. So if I want to make them a little closer together, I would say that -15. Again, I have to click off of it to be able to see. See, that's way too close. There is an undo button, so I'll just undo that as well. And then convert text to outlines. This is the same thing as in Illustrator, where we can convert text to outlines so that then the text is shapes. If you click that button, then now your text is not considered editable text anymore. You can tell because the properties panel doesn't have a T. And if it's not editable text, then you should be able to just resize it. And then if I wanted to use it to punch with, and I can't grab a hold of it right now, but if I wanted to use it to punch with, then I could do that. I could put it in front of something else and then punch out the letters inside of a shape. So that's what that create outlines or convert text to outlines would do. So anyway, I'm afraid I've talked for too long here, but this is basically a good rundown on the various things that YouIDraw can do. I've gone over the tools, compared it to Illustrator for you, and showed you how to export. What I haven't gone over is the fact that you can save these to your Google Drive. So if I go to Save As, it will have me validate my Google account. Then I can get in and save it to my own Google folder. They do save in a UI format. So you have to be back in this program in order to access it. You can also download it to like your computer. I'm not sure why you would do that, but if you didn't want to put it on a Google Drive, you could download it to your computer and then load it back from your computer to work on it more. So anyway, it's a pretty cool tool for free. Again, it does export with a watermark, so keep that in mind whenever you're creating objects, but it's a pretty good substitution for Illustrator if you're trying to learn.